Hello, welcome to this video tutorial. This one's all about the reasons for the rise in divorce, and what I want to do is go through the 5 reasons but also make the links to other topics and the impact that divorce might have on other topics like on children, couples, family diversity and so on, in order to meet the needs of the 10 mark question where you are asked to make links to other topics. Okay, so more couples are getting divorced, and some couples are more likely to get divorced, and they are particularly those that marry young, those that have children before marriage, those that cohabit, and those that include partners that have been married before. So we've got a little bit of background about those there. There are 5 main reasons. So firstly is the changes in the law. And the main law change that you've got to be referring to was the Divorce Reform Act, which was in 1969. It came into effect in 1971, but generally from throughout the 19th century and into the 20th century, there has been major changes in the law which made it a lot easier for women especially to get a divorce. And there have been 3 kinds of changes to the law. Equalising the grounds. So it was equal for both men and women in the past. Men could divorce unfaithful wives, but women had to prove cruelty. Widening the grounds for divorce, and this meant that it also included irretrievable breakdown of marriage and made it cheaper as well. Okay. The second explanation is secularisation. Secularisation basically just means the decline in the influence of religion, and this is mirrored by the fact that church attendances is going down. People are just not religious anymore. There's a bit of an overlap with the decline in people getting married as well. So the importance of religion is declining in the UK. Rise in expectation of marriage is the 3rd reason. Ronald Fletcher, who is a functionalist, argues that the high expectations people place on marriage today are a major cause of rising divorce rates. Higher expectations make couples less willing to tolerate an unhappy marriage. In the past, people typically got married for economic reasons, and because of economic reasons, that was one of the reasons why they stayed together. But what we're starting to see now is that people are getting married purely for love, and then they're realising that this romantic love, I tell my students, marriage is typically boring. It is quite boring. You do quite a lot of the same things. My students laugh at me because I'll say things like I have the same thing for my tea every night and what have you. So it is typically boring, and that excitement does wear off of getting married, and people are choosing to get divorced. Now, functionalists like Ronald Fletcher, I've just mentioned, are quite optimistic though, because despite people having a high expectation of marriage and they are getting divorced, the fact that people are getting remarried shows that they might not be happy with the person that they're married to, but they are still got a little bit of faith in marriage, full stop. The 3rd, are we up to the 3rd, 4th? Whatever. Mustn't say the D word. In the past it was frowned upon, whereas now there is this thing called a decline in stigma. Stigma is shame or a negative label attached to a thing or to a person, and nowadays there is no real negative stigma against people that have got divorced. So there is definitely a change in attitudes. It has become more socially acceptable to get divorced nowadays. And then lastly, the 5th reason, there is an increase in women's financial independence. There is a change in the position of women. Women's economic position has left them less financially dependent on their husbands, and they are free to end an unsatisfactory marriage. And this really overlaps with other topics because women are much more likely to be in paid work. There is a lot of other legal changes such as the Equal Pay Act, Sex Discrimination Act, which is allowing women to enter the workforce. And changes within the education system, equal policies such as the national curriculum, which meant that girls had access to similar education as boys in 1988 and further. They're doing well in school, they're getting better paid jobs, more so than their mothers did and previous generations. And lastly, there is an availability of welfare benefits. That means that women are no longer dependent on their husbands if they want to get divorced and whatnot. Okay, so they're the 5 reasons sociologists typically agree on are the 5 reasons why there is an increase in divorce. So where does this fit in with a 10 marker? Well, the 10 mark, just to remind you, is on both the A-level paper and on the AS paper. And on the family, there is this outline and explain 2 things. Okay, it's not just on the family, it's on the belief section, and it's also on the research methods, theory methods section. And what they want you to do is to show that you can think cross-topic. These are questions that are typically not, they don't want you to be able to predict what could come up. Basically, they want to really show students that have got skill. Okay, so for example, on the 2017 paper, there was one which was, let us say, not universally welcomed. Some teachers and some students were a little bit shocked by this one. Others, like for example, I'm not going to blow my own trumpet here, but I did quite a lot of work on making students do cross links, and this is why I'm doing this video tutorial now, where they are thinking about how is it impacting other topics. So for some it was straightforward, for others it was a bit of a nightmare, this question. So 2 ways in which changing gender roles within the family has affected children's experiences of childhood, and they were like, whoa, what's going on with this one? So as you can see, they're linking 2 topics together, and so in order to follow that theme, let's have a think about how, as the change in divorce, how does that impact other topics following that vein? Okay, so firstly, how might divorce impact childhood? Well, childhood, if you look at the sociology of the personal life, such as from Carol Smart, she argues that we should view childhood from the viewpoint of children rather than as an adult looking back. And she said that not all children experience the same childhood, and some children do experience divorce, and so that's one way that we could show a link between the 2 topics. And what I've showed you here is a link to a TED Talk, The Impact of Divorce on Children. It is in the Webb textbook as an activity and media link, so that's the textbook that I'm referring to, and you might want to refer to that as well. I will put the link in the comments for you to refer to. But another thing is how might divorce impact on child-centeredness? Well, you could argue that in the past that couples typically stayed together for the children, and you could argue that was more child-centered to what it is like now, where couples are getting divorced and the children just have to go along with it. So you could make a link across there as well. The second one, you could make a link to the couples or the division of labour topic. So feminists would argue that there is a movement away from the expressive role. Women are now working, they can afford to get divorced, so movement from the instrumental and the expressive roles. And also they're not willing to put up with the dual burden, they're not willing to put up with basically doing everything in the home, and because they are going out to work, they can afford to get divorced. I think it was Jenny Somerville, a feminist, who argued that women dissatisfied with their relationships can show men the door now. So you've got a little bit of a cross-link there. Demography, people are living longer, rising life expectancy, for example. So you could argue that if people are living longer, the lifespan of a marriage is a lot longer now as well. So in the past, if you were only living to the age of 40, mid-40s, 50, the length of your marriage might only be 20 odd years, but now people are living up until their 80s, late 80s, 90s. That is a massively long time. So obviously people live longer, they just don't want to stay with the person that they're married with for that length of time. You can make cross links to ethnicity as well. Indian families have lower levels of divorce, and that will bring down the family patterns in the UK as well. How might it link to family diversity topic? Feminists would argue that women are breaking free from oppression, they're breaking free from patriarchy, so they would welcome family diversity, and divorce is one of those things that have influenced the rise in family diversity. Postmodernists would argue that we've moved from a modern society where structures and relationships was quite fixed, it was nuclear, and we've moved to a postmodern society, and sociologists such as Giddens and Beck argue that we have become more individual, we are free to pursue our own self-interest, and they call it the individualisation thesis. So divorce has led to that. People are choosing to get divorced if they want to. They don't feel obliged to stay married because of social or social structures or being socially acceptable. Lastly, New Right. They argue that divorce is undesirable, it creates lone parent families, a burden on the welfare state, and also the knock-on effect on educational achievement of children, and antisocial behaviour, and they see it as problematic. And then lastly, obviously, it influences the policies topic. So divorce is one of the main changes in legislation that has had a direct impact on families and households in the UK today. So definitely there's a cross-topic link there. Okay, so thank you for listening. Just to summarise, this is all about the reasons for the divorce and links to the 10-mark question and how to think cross-topic. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments below. I will put the link to the TED Talk in there also, and keep on listening. Thank you.